resigned as the first United States ambassador to the newly independent Philippines and returned to the United States. MacNutt penned a letter describing his stay in the islands during his travels throughout South Asia and Europe, and he distributed it to State Department bureaus. He stated that the declining world lacks appreciation and comprehension of our relations with the Philippines. MacNutt underlined the need for a coordinated public campaign throughout Asia and the rest of the world to educate and enlighten dependent peoples in the benefits of being in the American orbit in the backdrop of escalating ideological friction and growing calls for self-determination. Despite the Truman administration's best attempt to portray a positive image of independence worldwide, attitudes of Philippine independence changed over time and remained linked to the global development of the Cold War. Ended, various and frequently contradictory concepts of Philippine independence arose in the United States, elsewhere in the world, and among Filipinos.
Marcos Jr. has said that the Philippines must explore bilateral interaction with China. President-elected Rodrigo Duterte was threatened to scrap the 1998 Visiting Forces Agreement and the 2014 Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. The Marcos administration must take into account the modern regional situation. ASEAN could earn the respect and tolerance of communist governments and establish links with democratic nations. Marcos lead the less developed nations in tackling issues of poverty and inequality, providing them with a strong collective voice. The Vietnam War and the communist takeovers of Cambodia and Laos are just two instances of types of crisis ASEAN could help resolve permanently. In 1986, Corazon Aquino became president after winning an election that had been challenged by many people who wanted her out of the office. She took over several large companies like San Miguel Corporation and Meralco, which resulted in people losing their jobs because they were naturalized during martial law.
Philippines and Japan signed a joint declaration entitled A Strengthened Strategic Partnership to Advance Shared Principles and Partnership. President Aquino launched negotiations on the Status of Forces Agreement or SOFA that would grant access to Philippine military bases to the United States Defense Forces. The Philippines filed a claim against China with the UN Convention on the Law of the Seas Arbitral Tribunal. Philippines seeks evaluation of its unclosed rights to Spratly Islands, Scarborough Shoal, and other land features inside its 200-mile EEZ. The EDCA is an executive that updates and improves the Mutual Defense Treaty of 1951. The United States and the Philippines signed the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement or EDCA. Under the EDCA, the Philippines and the United States can increase their defense capabilities. Rotating American forces and Philippine locations can increase training and support for the long-term upgrading of the Philippine military. The Full Border Protection Project is the territorial defense objective of the Philippines. The surveillance, deterrence, and border patrol capabilities of the PAF, PN, and Philippine Coast Guard support this mission. To achieve this objective, the AFP's capabilities, requirements, and territorial defense scopes must be enhanced. President Aquino III's foreign policy, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte has committed to pursue an independent foreign strategy. Less than 3 months after assuming office following the Permanent Court of Arbitration's landmark judgment in favor of the Philippines in its territorial dispute with China over the South China Sea, President Duterte launched a diplomatic campaign to earn Chinese favor. During the ASEAN meeting in Laos, he minimized the South China Sea dispute to obtain Chinese diplomatic and economic concessions. President Duterte has also stated that he intends to remove the Philippines from the United States, which would alter the strategic balance of the area and contradict his country's long-standing strategy of maintaining strong security connections with its sole strategic partner. Duterte declared, following a visit to Laos, that the Philippines would cease patrolling the South China Sea with the U.S. Navy in order to avoid upsetting Beijing.
Additionally, he desires the withdrawal of American Special Forces assisting AFP counterterrorism operation in Mindanao. He remarks on actions damage the Philippines' standing in ASEAN regarding the South China Sea problem, which could harm Philippine-U.S. security relations. Like Cambodia and China, President Duterte claimed that the 12 July PCA ruling was a bilateral matter between the Philippines and China and not an Asian issue prior to the September 2016 Asian Summit in Laos. The Philippines and the United States would no longer conduct coordinate patrols in the South China Sea, he announced on September 13, 2016. Instead, the Navy of the Philippines should exclusively conduct patrols in the Philippine territorial waters.
Following one of the most momentous national elections in the country's history, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., with majority vote, would become the country's 17th president. The return to power of his family 36 years after they were forced to exile in the United States might have far-reaching implications for his country's foreign policy. Increased geopolitical concerns and regional power shifts are anticipated to provide a number of challenging obstacles to the presidency of Bongbong Marcos. After he assumes office, his repeated campaigns calls for unity will be put to the test, particularly on decisive issues such as territorial and maritime disputes in the West Philippine Sea.
Marcos Jr. once stated that the Philippine foreign policy should not be influenced by the requirements of other nations. He committed to preserve the country's long-term interests from a geopolitical conflict between the U.S. and China. In exchange for the more trade and investment, President Rodrigo Duterte has shown a preference for China.